Sign up for a glorious 50 minutes massage. And for a tad more, there's a 50-minute spa facial at $95. Got aching muscles? Then treat yourself to a 55-minute deep muscle massage for just $98. Spa Week at Windermere Day Spa, April 27th to May 1st. 2 locations, Caves Village, 327-613-506, or Harbor Bay, 393-8788, or 393-0033. Call now. You deserve a sensational break time.
Comfort Suites Paradise Island sensational spring sale starts at $158 per night plus taxes and fees for single or double occupancy. Receive a 4th night free with 3 paid nights. Limited inventory, blackout dates apply, and advance booking is required. Featuring free food and beverage credit up to $50 based on length of stay and redeemable at Crusoe's Restaurant and Splash Pool Bar. VAT and gratuity not included. All guests enjoy complimentary use of Atlantis and Aquaventure Water Park. Daily full American buffet breakfast, Wi-Fi and parking. Kids 11 and under stay free with the parent and eat free at Crusoe's Restaurant with each paying adult. Call 605-6300, 363-3680 or WhatsApp 557-8483. Offer valid until April 30th. Comfort Suites Paradise Island, offering comforting days and sweet nights.
Apex Award Signs and Engraving is ready for this year's graduations. Celebrate your graduates with high-quality signs at low prices. We do promotional merchandise printing, photo imaging, personalized diploma covers, plaques, plates, albums, pens, pencils, and a whole lot more. Show teachers appreciation too. Honor your teacher with a beautiful crystal award, mugs or tumblers. Celebrate graduation with help from Apex Award Signs and Engraving. Number 128 Mount Royal Avenue. Open 9 to 5 Monday to Friday until 1 on Saturdays.
This is Global Radio 99.5.
Global 99.5 FM reminds our listeners that the views and opinions expressed on this show are those of the host and guests and not necessarily the opinions of the owners of Global Communications Network and the operators of this radio station.
There is power in the name of Jesus. There is power in the name of Jesus. There is power in the name of Jesus. To break every chain, break every chain, break every chain. To break every chain, break every chain, break every chain.
Just want to say a pleasant good afternoon to those of you tuning in now on this beautiful Sunday afternoon, this rainy Sunday afternoon. Wherever you are, I don't know if it's raining there. Where I am, there's a sprinkle of rain. And so it's a blessing. It's a pleasure just to be here tuning in every Sunday on Global 99.5, Cable TV 99.5. And we are on every Sunday, 4 to 5, on the program Transforming Lives. Transforming Lives is a program where we recognize that a true transformation can only take place out of a relationship with Jesus Christ. Because we recognize on a program such as this that no transformation can take place unless Christ leads, guides, and directs. And so on a program like this, if you're here for the first time, this is a program where we share knowledge, wisdom, and information that can help individuals, whether spiritually, physically, financially, mentally, emotionally. I mean, you just name it. And that's what we're seeking to do on a program like this. Empower our people with education. First Christ, and afterwards, everything else will be added. So I just want to welcome you here on behalf of my co-host, Jacqueline Gardner, Dave Williams, those of you listening on Cable TV 974, those of you on Global 99.5, thank you for joining us. Those of you on Facebook, on YouTube, we also want to welcome you also and invite you to share the link. Okay, share the link now with persons, invite them to join us. And as I travel, and Jackie have testified of the same thing, as we go about our business. Persons come up to us, example, this last week at BPL. You know, the first surprise were persons were like, wow, you back to BPL? What happened? And I said, well, I'm on a contract. And then I had about at least 3 persons actually came to me and said, I listened to you on the radio, you know, and I said, oh, I'm glad to know that people still tuning in on the radio. But on a program like this, normally we begin with Moments with Christ with Dr. L.D. McMillan. And Dr. McMillan, we want to offer our condolences. He's actually in transit, if he has not arrived yet, actually to Nassau for the funeral of his sister-in-law, which take place, I believe it's tomorrow. And so if he's not on, perhaps he has not arrived or he is on his way home, which one, I don't know. And so in that regard, we will just pass up Moments with Christ today. I want to introduce to you Shandera Smith. She's a co-host for this program, Wellness Sunday. We usually do this on the 3rd Sunday every month, but she has some guests today. Welcome, Shandera. How are you?
I am doing well, thanks. How are you?
Well, I just want to say I am fine in Christ, so I just want to thank those who've joined us, invite them to share the link. I will be doing that once I come off this platform, inviting others, reminding them to share. We have a very powerful topic today, and I myself, number one of all persons, want to hear this information. Thank you, and just introduce the guests.
Yes, thank you so much. Yes, today we are privileged to have with us 2 very renowned and excellent doctors here in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. The first one I'm going to introduce is Dr. Sean Knowles. I'm going to read his bio for you so you can see what I'm talking about. So Dr. Sean Leonardo Knowles is a former physician at the Sunderland Rehabilitation Center, where he worked for 10 years and is also a certified gambling addiction specialist. In July 2023, he began working as the psychiatric medical officer at the Bahamas Department of Correctional Services, overseeing the mental health and juvenile adult inmates and staff members, and as a reserve physician for the Royal Bahamas Defense Force. He is also Emmanuel Medical Center's co-chief executive officer and physician, where he practices general medicine, including mental health disorders. Dr. Knowles earned his Bachelor's of Arts degree in biology with minors in chemistry and Spanish from St. John's University, and subsequently obtained a Master of Science in Mathematics and Statistics from Youngstown State University. Dr. Knowles attended medical school at the University of the West Indies, where he obtained his Bachelor's of Medicine, Bachelor of Surgery degree. Furthermore, he was the recipient of the 2016 British Chevening Scholarship and completed a Master of Science in Immunology of Infectious Diseases at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine in 2017. Dr. Knowles is married to the former Doretha Strawn, and the couple has 1 daughter, Leah. Dr. Knowles, thank you so much for being here and welcome to the show.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon. Okay, then I'm going to introduce Dr. Norad Morgan. So Dr. Morgan attended St. Francis and Joseph Primary School, then St. Augustine's College High School. He then obtained a Bachelor of Science degree in biochemistry and a Bachelor of Arts degree in music from Beloit College in Beloit, Wisconsin. Dr. Morgan studied medicine at the University of the West Indies, Mona, Jamaica, and studied immunology at Trinity College, University of Dublin, Republic of Ireland. Dr. Morgan is presently a clinical medical officer in the Ministry of Health and also practices medicine privately at Emmanuel Medical Center. He is married to Dr. Shell McLean Morgan and has 2 daughters. So they all have girls. Well, one of girls. Dr. Morgan, welcome and thank you for being here.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes. So do you have PowerPoint presentations or you want to do a conversation?
Well, I don't have a presentation. I don't know if Dr. Knowles, you have one? I don't have one.
No, we can just have a formal conversation.
We can have a conversation.
Yes.
Okay, great. All right, so let's talk about alcoholism first. All right, what is the prevalence of alcoholism in the Bahamas currently? Any stats on that?
Okay, so let me start. Before I give the statistics, I think it's important to kind of give a definition. Alcohol, it's the ingredient that is obviously found in beer, wines, and spirits, and that causes drunkenness. It is formed when yeast breaks down, or when yeast ferments, and the sugars that are found in foods. It is a depressant, and so when I say it's a depressant, that means that it causes the central nervous system to be depressed, if I can refer to it in that way, essentially reducing inhibitions while simultaneously impairing physical arousal and performance. One of the key statistics that I'm aware of that I was really concerned about was based on the high school study that was done, and I believe that was in 2011. And one of the statistics that came from that particular study involved high school students, so, well, junior high school students. And if I can share that with you, I think it'll give us a synopsis of how serious alcohol is. From my professional opinion, alcohol is the most dangerous drug in this country. And so the Bahamas Secondary School Drug Prevalence Survey, there were 2,639 students in that study. They were in grades 8, 10, and 12. So the study encompassed 7 islands, and the age range would have been 10 to 17. So based on that study, they recognized that the drug prevalence for each of those ages were incredibly high. So for those who were, again, ages 10 to 17, they found in females, 70% of them have a lifetime prevalence of alcohol use, while 68% boys had a lifetime prevalence. So meaning having their first drink of alcohol regardless of whatever age. And again, I stress the age range 10 to 17. 70% females, 69% males. That's very staggering. Yes. And the reason why that is very concerning, and of course, we can say that it's much higher in adults for the most part. The reason why that is staggering is that the brain does not complete development until the age of 24. And so you have young people using substances prior to the brain system development. That's going to result in a lot of problems in terms of stunting their brain's development. It's going to cause them to develop learning and cognitive deficits. It's going to result in them developing addictions. That's going to result in them having a poor prognosis. For those who may recognize at some point in their life that they have an alcohol problem, it's not so easy. They're going to have to be in and out of rehab, which is very, very unfortunate. And so I chose that particular study to share, again, the Bahamas Secondary School Drug Prevalence Survey, and that is available online. You could actually go and read through it for yourself. Because if it's happening with our children, 10 to 17, imagine what it's doing to adults who may have or may not even recognize they have an alcohol use disorder. And so I know we're going to talk about sexual health and, of course, addictions in general. But at the end of the day, the alcohol use in this nation is quite serious. It's staggering. It's concerning. And we as a nation, I call all the policymakers to put policies in place to protect our young people. Again, age 24, that's when the brain completes development. And I'm encouraging no young person who's in high school, you're in college, do not start any substance, be it alcohol, be it marijuana, be it cocaine. In addition to that, we also have to be aware, we're talking about addictions. You know, we have gaming addiction, we have gambling addiction, we have those behavioral addictions. Young people engaging in early promiscuity, engaging in sexual activity, that can result in them being promiscuous because they develop a sexual addiction. And so while this is a very important topic that we are discussing today, I really want to highlight and drive home the ramifications of how serious it is when we're talking about addictions in general and specifically alcohol use.
Yes, that is staggering. So what do you think are some of the factors driving them to drink alcohol at such an early age?
So home environment, that same study, the drug prevalence, actually found that the home was the place where these kids, the majority of these kids, were exposed to drinking. And so the environment itself, where they're seeing a parent drinking, certainly if the parent is becoming intoxicated, they see all of the trauma associated with that. So the early exposure is in the home, certainly peer pressure. And some of the reasons why people in general, adults, would want to engage in drinking or even sadly develop an alcohol addiction is one is to feel good. They want to feel better. You're dealing with stress, you're dealing with problems in life. And so some people turn to alcohol as a way of trying to mitigate, even though it's a temporary fix, to try to cope with life and to cope with trauma. And so, if you're feeling depressed, you're feeling sad, you're feeling stressed out, some people, they use that as a form of coping mechanism, not realizing that you're drinking a whole bottle of wine, you're drinking a whole bottle of Stoli, a case of beer. You're actually doing significant damage to your mind and to your body. That includes even, for us men and women, our sexual health. Our sexual health is compromised, and hopefully we can talk a little bit about that as well.
Yes. Wow. Oh boy. Yeah. So I am thinking about access. I remember maybe about 10, 12 years ago, we were doing a nutrition intervention at one of the primary schools. My colleague and I, and so there were two streams. So I ended up with the top stream, and she ended with the other stream. I don't want to say the bottom stream, but the children who were not as academically smart. And she mentioned to me that she confiscated I don't remember how much ounces, how many ounces it was, but a child was carrying a lot of alcohol on him. And I was like, what at such an early age? I'm thinking about the access. How did they get such access to alcohol? And so that one sort of threw me. And I was like, boy, that's really not good. I mean, they're so young to be consuming such a harsh beverage on their developing bodies. I thought that was sort of crazy. But,
absolutely, yes. And I would have worked with some students already who would have been referred to me, Dr. Smith, in reference to them drinking alcohol, taking alcohol in their thermoses at school, sharing it with their friends, the drinking in the locker room. The vaping is another issue now with our students, boys and girls, and we have the nicotine vapes, and we have the THC vapes. And so it's disturbing to me knowing that this is taking place amongst our children who essentially are going to be the leaders of our country in the next 10, 15, 20 years. And so if they're developing these addictions at a young age, it's concerning.
Wow. Do you find any gambling addictions in the youth? You have any recorded any?
Yes, and we would have, I don't have any formal studies on that. The Gambling Addiction Committee from the Sanders Rehabilitation Center, we're looking at trying to do some sort of a survey to get an idea of what's happening. But yes, in terms of referring students who would be gambling in the schools, yes, it's happening. And so they're throwing dice, gambling, for money, some of them for lunch, and it's all the same principle. When you gamble with the expectation of probability that you will win something. And so once that's reinforced, pretty much it's going to lead to them going and seeking other forms of gambling, particularly once they reach that age requirement to be able to go into our gambling houses, number houses, and to begin gambling. So you can see how it can spiral out of control. To answer your question, the answer is yes. We do have students who essentially have a gambling disorder as a result of their gambling within the school system.
Wow. And do you find it to be more on boys or girls?
It seems to be, from the number of referrals we would have received, is higher amongst boys. But what is interesting, though, I'm seeing a lot of girls who have the vaping issue, almost on par as the boys. Most people would not expect that. The alcohol, the majority I would have been from, in terms of boys. But again, going by the secondary school survey, the lifetime prevalence was about 1% higher in females who are drinking alcohol. So yeah, all of this together just says that we as a nation, the Ministry of Health and Wellness, Ministry of Education, the Ministry of Sports and Culture, we really need to come together put measures in place to safeguard our young people. All right, the nation that, we're in election season right now. I'll be honest with you, that's one of the first questions I'm asking my representatives. What are we going to do about the public health issues in our nation? I would like to know, not just because I'm a physician, but also because I'm responsible for a huge population of people that are depending on our health system, and also because I was a concerned citizen. And so at the end of the day, I say it, and if nobody remembers anything else I'm saying on what I have to share with you, is we really need to help our young people. We need to make sure that they are not engaging in these early activities that has the likelihood of destroying their lives prematurely.
Wow, yes. Okay, wow. Yeah, so that's
Let's say it like it is. I'm not going to sugarcoat.
Awesome, and I love that. Okay, so if any of you in the audience if you have any questions, please go ahead and put them in the chat for us. We have a question so far. It says, is addiction inherited, or are some more predisposed to this menace?
Sorry, repeat that for me.
Behavior. So is it a learned behavior, or an inherited behavior, or learned behavior?
So very good question. And I'm going to say it's both. And let me explain to you why. So when it comes to mental health disorders, we recognize, and the research substantiates this, that up to 60% of mental illnesses could be due to genetics, or genetic predisposition. So for a family that may have low serotonin levels, we recognize that serotonin is one of those neurotransmitters in the brain that's responsible for overall mood, helping you to feel happier, be able to concentrate, to sleep, to eat, to enjoy life. And so if that is low because of the genetics of that family, then it sets the stage up for them to deal with not feeling right. And that's why I say some people turn to alcohol as a means, of temporarily being able to feel better, because it does make you feel elated and give you that euphoric feeling. And so in that regard, it could be considered inherent in terms of the genetics of it. With that, of course, environmental, because children are going to mimic, they see what their parents do. And if they see the parents drinking and having a good time and laughing and all of that, it's going to, more or less cause the curiosity to come out. And even though their parents may say, hey, you're not allowed to drink, but if the alcohol is there on the counter or is in the refrigerator, the kid is going to get curious and say, you know what, let me try and taste this. And of course, that could lead to them taking it to school and so on and so forth. Now, in addition to that, in terms of the genetics part of it, it's also due to, peer pressure. My friends are doing it. I see them, they're enjoying it. We're getting together after school and drinking beer or drinking Stoli or whatever. That can obviously set the stage as well. So the answer is both. It has a likelihood of being both.
All right. Okay, so we're going to switch. We're going to come back to alcohol because we're going to connect the two. So Dr. Conrad, Dr. Morgan, we're going to bring you into the conversation and talking about sexual addictions. Do you find that it's an issue in the Bahamas?
Sorry, could you repeat that question, please?
Do you find that sexual addictions is an issue in the Bahamas?
Yes, sexual addiction. I know Dr. Knowles will be better able to speak to that, but sex is an issue in the Bahamas, and by virtue of the high numbers of our STIs, and mainly in the 15 to 24 age group, we see a spike in our STIs, especially STIs such as chlamydia and gonorrhea. So we're seeing a spike in that. Last year was, and this is anecdotally, I don't have the numbers, I think they're being compiled, but anecdotally, last year, we saw so many cases of chlamydia until we were rather concerned, until we had to actually expand in government our clinic hours. And this was mainly in the 15 to 24 age group. Now, we do believe that STIs are also high in the other age groups, but this is where it peaks. And so I would say that young people are not taking STIs seriously. I would also say that young people are not protecting themselves. They're not condomizing, so they're having a lot of condomless sex, in addition to not knowing the status of their partners. And they're taking risks. And young people, by virtue of being young, tend to be risk takers. And so I wouldn't say there's sexual addiction, but I must say that they're not very discriminate in the way they have sex and how they have sex. And in terms of alcohol use, we do see in young people, they're also, as Dr. Knowles would have mentioned, they're risk takers. And with this concomitant, indiscriminate sexual behavior comes drug use, such as alcohol, vaping. Now, Dr. Knowles will be able to speak better to the higher levels of drugs like cocaine and all the others, but I'm sure they're a part of the mix also. And we know that, as Dr. Knowles alluded to, that the use of these mind-altering drugs, for example, alcohol, it impairs their judgment. And so they feel less inhibited, they feel freer, they feel, and so they are more likely to take risks, sexual risks, when they're under the influence of alcohol. And this poses a problem in the heat of the matter. In the matter, you're not using a condom. You're not thinking, what if this person has an STI and I can catch it? You're not thinking these things because the drugs, alcohol, is impairing your judgment. And so there is a correlation between alcohol use and taking risk with sexual behavior amongst our young people.
Okay. All right. And so someone asked in the chat, so do you think there's a link between sexual violations and sexual addictions? Or if you want to explain the two terms.
Well, I'll deal with violation. I guess Dr. Knowles will deal with addictions. Yes, when young people or anyone in general is under the influence of alcohol, they're not in their right mind. And so a lot of the sexual assault cases that I have to deal with, a lot of people are under the influence of alcohol. I've known females who say, Dr. Morgan, I don't know how this happened. I went out drinking. I know the fella. We out drinking. We having a good time. And we started a sexual act. So we started in sexual acts. And then all of a sudden, things got hot and heavy. I told him no. And he proceeded with the sexual act. And one thing led to the next. Both are under the influence. And a lot of these things happen at parties. A lot of the influence, obviously, at parties, at regattas. And, anecdotally, I could say that a lot of these things happen in the setting where alcohol is. And it's usually at parties, regattas, and seasons where alcohol use and drug use are prevalent. And so there is a correlation between mind-altering drugs and sexual assault. Yes.
In terms of the sexual addictions, we recognize, and I do remember recalling one particular study that I had read where it was noted that up to 10% of university students in the USA, or first world countries, USA, Great Britain, they develop compulsive sexual behavior at an early age, and due to trauma in their life, due to, in addition to trauma, early exposure to pornography, being in high-stress environments. Now, in terms of the trauma, as Dr. Morgan said, with sexual, violations, if that happens at an early age, several things can happen. Again, keep in mind the brain's development taking place up until the age of 24. And so if you have, a young person, let's say 14, 15, engaging in their first sexual encounter, be it with the same sex or be it with the opposite sex, that can somehow determine how they are going to proceed in life sexually, meaning they're going to, have an attraction for the same sex, or they're going to have an attraction for the opposite sex. And of course, the whole issue of promiscuity then becomes a matter of concerns, thereby leading to other concerns, which Dr. Morgan can attest to, with the sexually transmitted diseases and so on and so forth. And so that development, the early development, and I have a problem with the age of consent being 16. Again, based on what we know psychologically with the brain's development, because that does indeed set that young person up possibly to not only engage in promiscuous activity, but of course to be victims of violence when it comes to another person wanting to take advantage of them. And so we recognize then that that whole age of development can set the course for persons developing sexual addictions. Again, I caution people, I say it all the time, people with young kids, be careful who you leave your kids with. You need to make sure that whoever is taking care of your child is someone you know for a fact, whom you trust. And if I can use myself as an example, with one child, my only daughter, there were only 4 people who were allowed to pick her up from school. All right, that would have been myself, my wife, my mother-in-law, and my mother. No one else I allowed to pick my daughter up. And when my daughter stayed with her grandmother, my mother-in-law, she kept her in her eyesight 24/7. She had to go to the store, whatever, she took her with her. So I say that to say that's how important it is, because even something as being touched appropriately, being violated at a young age, an innocent child, by someone who is, I would say, is mentally deranged. If you are having these kinds of thoughts that you would want to engage in some sort of sexual activity with a child, that has the capacity to destroy that child's life. And I've seen it all the time. I'm seeing more and more of it. People who are not able to move on in life because of something that happened in their childhood that is now keeping them bound. All right. So it's very serious, and I intend to be very blunt in sharing with you the things that I see from a clinical perspective of what is happening in our young people, what is happening in our country. Are we there?
Oh, I'm so sorry. I got knocked off for a couple of seconds there. Sorry for that. Okay, so yes. So what about, do you think there's a social media influence when it comes to alcoholism, or even Dr. Morgan, but in terms of sexual addictions? Any social media influence that may be interplaying there?
Well, we do know that I know this is a cliche, but sex does sell. Sex does sell. So we know in terms of marketing and rhetoric that, if you link a sexual environment or a sexy picture to alcohol or cigarette, we know that somehow, and Sean again will be able to talk about this, what happens in the brain in terms of how we connect sex with alcohol and drugs. It's a marketing tool. So our environment, everywhere we go, we see sex being advertised, and connections in the brain are made with alcohol, cigarette. It even uses more benign things to sell. But even in our day-to-day encounters, we see that, well, personally, and I'm not a judgmental person, but people are dressing a bit more provocative. So sex may not only be on the screens or on your phones, but we notice that females are dressing a bit more provocative. So, we could talk about that. Now we know that doesn't make an excuse for sexual assault or any kind of thing, but sex is all around us. Sex is always in our eye shop, right? And so, I think the sexual environment, whether it be in media whether it be in printed media, social media, or in real life. You know, it's this, the environment is very charged with sex, and this does have an impact on it does have an impact on STIs. You know, there's a correlation. I mean, you could just, you know, a teenager could just pick up their phone and pornography just pops. Sometimes pornography pops up without them even, you know, going to look for it. So pornography is right in your hand. Is right in your hand. And so sex is right there. And we know that I had to talk to a parent and her son who I kind of, you know, helped. And, you know, he was going to a party. And the first thing I was asking, would alcohol and drugs be there? You know, he's a teenager, a 16-year-old boy. And, you know, he was like, duh, doc, alcohol will be there. But I gave her and I gave him my advice. And I spoke to the same issue. I'm saying that when you're under the influence of alcohol, when you're under the influence of marijuana, you know, you make poor sexual decisions. You know, and so many things could happen. But sex is all around us, sexual innuendos, sexual suggestion, you know, the hint of sex is always around. We just have to train our young people to recognize them and to make good decisions and to pray for them, that they wouldn't fall prey. But I mean, a sexually charged environment. I was just talking to my wife just probably this morning or yesterday. We were saying like sexual suggestions are all around us. I mean, you know, I feel so sorry for our young people because it is right in their face, you know.
Yes.
Yeah, I can add to that, a very, very good perspective, Dr. Morgan. From the addiction aspect, I think if our listening audience can have an appreciation for what addiction really is, it's a chronic brain disease, first of all. There's nothing good about an addiction. You're addicted to something, that's not good, because it means that has control of your life. You really and truly are, you know, bound to that particular behavior or that drug. And so it involves the brain's reward systems. You would have heard about dopamine. Dopamine is that neurotransmitter in the brain associated with the brain's reward system. And so dopamine, when there's an increase in dopamine, you feel good. All right, essentially it causes you to want to seek that behavior, to seek that substance that's causing that flood of dopamine in the brain. Now, the danger of that, I'm going back, is at the end of this, and nobody can say that Dr. Knowles didn't say it, the brain's development up until age 24. Brain develops from a backwards forward direction. This right here is the prefrontal cortex. That's the executive decision part of the brain. That's the last part of the brain to develop. And so parents, you cannot expect your 15, 16, 10-year-old children to make wise decisions because this isn't developed yet. That's why God gave essentially children to parents so that they could have the wisdom on to control what they allow for them to take part in. And so the marketing industry capitalizes on that, you know, because once a person has a sexual encounter, once they have, you know, alcohol, their first cigarette or marijuana, where the brain's reward system becomes really activated, perhaps even overly activated, to the point where they have developed an addiction, then that is just going to cause you, that's going to be a trigger. Seeing the lady in the skimpy bathsuit holding a whole bottle of beer, or seeing the male with the all six-pack holding a glass of, I don't know, mixed drink or whatever. So that's what the marketing industry uses to capitalize, to draw people in. And if you don't have the wisdom to recognize that, you'll fall into that trap. So that's a trigger. Once a person has an addiction, what they see, places they go, what they hear, you know, seeing someone who is elated and euphoric from drinking alcohol, all of those are triggers that's going to cause me to go and seek the drug, or even go to seek sleeping with someone. Even though I recognize, I may even have the knowledge to say, you know what, I really shouldn't be doing this. But the urge is so intense when it comes to an addiction, so overpowering, it causes that person to really and truly not have the judgment and the wisdom to avoid it.
Oh, yes. Okay, so I see we have two questions in the chat before I ask another question. How can the impact of sexual violation affect marriage or future relationships?
Oh, excellent question. Listen, it has the capacity to wreak havoc in marriage. And even though, getting marital counseling is not the be all and end all, I encourage people, if they're deciding they're going to get married, to have marital counseling. Hopefully the counselor is someone who's experienced and seasoned enough. And the reason why I say that is that if you have trauma has not been dealt with, and you try to get into a union with someone, that could lead to serious problems in the marriage. So to give you a few examples, if a young lady was molested, she was raped, she's not dealt with that, it's going to be very difficult for her to develop intimacy with her husband. Even though, she may crave companionship, she may even be in love with him, but because that's not been dealt with, that's going to hinder her from, really and truly being in a loving sexual relationship with her husband. The opposite is also true of a young male in our society where, homosexuality is really frowned upon. If he engages in that first encounter with another male, it may cause him to develop same-sex attractions. But because our society is so unforgiving, he keeps that on the down low. And so if he decides, let me get married, and yes, he may truly love the young lady, but because what has happened to him in the past has not been dealt with, that could set the stage for him in engaging in sexual activities, with other men, even while he's married. And so you can understand now how the dangers of untreated trauma, especially when it's related to sex. Sex is one of the most powerful experiences we can have. Once you engage, once that dopamine has been released from the first sexual encounter, it keeps you wanting it more and more, that feeling, the wonderful feeling. That's how God created us. Sex was created for the union in a marriage between a man and a woman, between a husband and wife, to procreate, to reproduce. And so the whole pleasure aspect of it confined to marriage is the way that the good Lord created it. And so again, I gave you all of those bits of scenarios to give you an idea of how it can truly affect a marriage. And so I encourage people, if you have baggage, you've had some bad experiences in your life, the person you're getting married to needs to be aware of that. And then you seek counseling, you seek therapy to help you get beyond that so that you at least stand a chance of having a happy marriage. Nobody gets married to end up getting a divorce. I can't see that happening. You end up making your vows, you may truly love the person, but because of these past hurts that you're dealing with, it hinders you from having the best quality of life within a marriage.
Yes. Yes, that is so true. Okay, the other question, at what age should parents stop having children sleeping in the beds with them whilst they're carrying on adult sexual activities? At what age is the child aware what is going on?
No, that's an interesting question. I know, Dr. Moore, that's the first time anybody would ask me that. I will say this. Number one, it depends. I don't really have a set age, but I would say generally, by the time that child is ready for primary school, which is about age 5, 6, they should be accustomed to sleeping in their own bedrooms and having their own beds. But really and truly, it depends on the readiness of the child. You don't want it to be a case where the child develops anxiety where they can't sleep on their own. Because ultimately, you want that child to be independent, begin taking care of themselves, develop responsibility, and getting themselves ready for bed, putting on their pajamas, get ready for bed and all of that. So it becomes somewhat of a bond. I think if it's beyond the age of 6, where, you still have that child sleeping in the bedroom with you, it's not healthy. It's certainly not healthy if you are engaging in sexual activity, because that child should not be exposed to that. If your husband and wife, the wife wants a child in the bed, no, the child has a room. Put the child in the bed, get the child accustomed by that age of sleeping in bed. So children, I would say by that primary school level, they have an inkling of what's happening. They may not fully understand it, but kids talk amongst themselves. Some kids are more seasoned, sadly, compared to other kids. So one way or another, they may get the wrong perception of what is happening. But, you know, having sexual relations between two people is a private affair, and your children should not be exposed to that in any way, shape.
Exactly. I guess too, where you may have certain socioeconomic situations where um there may be just a one-bedroom house or everybody sleeps in the same room, and you have the auntie and her boyfriend on one corner, and so much other things could be going on, and the children have to be exposed to that. That it's traumatic.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And all I can say is as best as you can. Yeah. I mean, the economic situation has to be addressed. If you have 6 people in a 2-bedroom, you know, home, that's difficult. That's hard. Yeah. But the fundamental principle I'm trying to drive is that your kids should not be exposed to that. You know, it's a private affair between 2 people. The urge to have sex, you know, is strong. But at the end of the day, to answer that person's question, kids should not be exposed to that. Not at that young age at all.
Yes, totally agree. Dr. Morgan, you wanted to add to it before we go to the next question?
Yeah, I agree. I agree with Dr. Notes. Yes, they shouldn't be exposed to that. But it's definitely a reality.
Yes. Okay, another heavy question is coming in. In the case of sexual promiscuity, how does socioeconomics and poverty play into the equation as with illegal drug business?
All right, there is definitely an association. As an STI doctor, you get to see a lot. You get to see, my wife and I always talk about, you get to see the not so good side of humanity when you do STIs, because you see socioeconomic conditions, you see obviously poverty, you see power, you see drugs, you see sex, you see manipulation, you see domestic violence, you see sexual violence. And so a lot of this in my day-to-day work, I have to deal with. So there is a tie because, believe it or not, transactional sex, and transactional sex is the exchange of sex for money, is very common nowadays. And that too, I think, has been driving up our numbers, our STI numbers, our gonorrhea numbers, chlamydia, HIV, all of these numbers. It's an exchange, sex for money. And we do know, in retrospect, we now know that during COVID-19, there were some hard times. And so there was exchange of sex for money, right? And that too may have caused a spike in our STI stats. But yeah, we live in a society where a lot of people are struggling with hard financial times. Poverty is still a reality, right? And especially among our young people, they want things. They want things, right? And so that makes the perfect setup, albeit it's not a good thing, but that makes the perfect setup for transactional sex, exchange of sex for money. Young people may not, they may be in poverty, may not have it, and someone else have it. It's usually an older person, and it doesn't have to be an older man with a younger girl. It could be an older man with a younger man, right? And the exchange of sex for money is a reality in that circumstance. A lot of youngsters want things. They want clothes, they want shoes, they want money, they want to be able to go to Fusion, they want to be able to go certain places. And the exchange of sex for money makes that quite possible. And this isn't anything new. This isn't a novel occurrence. This has been happening for quite some time. And so there is an association with the exchange, with poverty, low socioeconomic status, and sex. And this is one of the factors that is driving up STIs among our young people, even among our high school students. And I see it a lot. I've diagnosed teenagers as young as 15, 16 with HIV. I remember a case, I had a 15-year-old who had HIV, syphilis, gonorrhea, and herpes.
Oh, man.
And she was pregnant.
Oh, gosh.
I remember that incident quite clearly. And she was with an older guy who actually had all these STIs, right? And the sad part about it, to add insult to injury, she was also pregnant. So, you know, my team and I, we not only have to look at her, but we also have to look at the safety of the child, right? And so sex is tied to a lot of unpleasant scenarios. And, you know, and I always say, Dr. Knowles and myself, sometimes we deal with the messiness in healthcare. Yeah, we deal with messy situations, difficult situations, right? And, you know, sex opens, as I say, sex opens the door to all kinds of things, right? You know, the messiness of humanity. And so, yeah, and so sexuality is definitely linked to poverty.
Okay. All right. So what does treatment look like when it comes to an alcoholic or a person who is, that's what Dr. Knowles, and then Dr. Morgan, in a case where you have the sexual issues going on? How are those persons treated? Whether medically or a comprehensive approach, how is it done?
Okay, so I'm going to break it or categorize it for you for the alcohol part of it. So number one is prevention. Prevention, truly, as cliche as it sounds, is better than cure. So putting measures in place to safeguard our young people. I would like, from a public health standpoint, and I know I'm going to get a lot of attacks for it, but I would like to see the drinking age be 24 in this country. But no Bahamian under the age of 24 can go into a bar, a restaurant, or drink any alcohol. No one would be able to, under the law, provide a young person that age. And again, I've given you the reason from that, from a anatomical and even physiological and psychiatric point of view, the brain's development. Yes. Nonetheless, ensuring our young people don't start any substances prior to the age of 24. For someone who is drinking alcohol, and not to say that everyone who drinks alcohol is an alcoholic or has an alcohol use disorder, but putting measures in place to make sure that you don't get it out of control. And so, again, based on the research, men can have 2 standard drinks in 24 hours. Women can have 1 standard drink. That is what we mean by drinking in moderation. And so whether you're going to a party, whether you're having dinner, recognize that, hey, this is a practice. I do drink wine, all right, but I'll have it with a meal, but you'll never ever see me drinking a whole bottle of wine. And if I do have 2 glasses, that's it in a day. Sometimes I go months without drinking. But the point is, you don't let the alcohol consume you. All right. So 2 standard drinks, men, because we metabolize alcohol differently from women. 1 standard drink of women. So now for someone who has an alcohol problem, an alcohol use disorder, they realize that it's addiction, I would say to you, get help. And so let me categorize that twice. One would be if it's in the acute setting where they are having alcohol withdrawals, that's a medical emergency. That person could actually die if they've gone on a binge drinking and all of a sudden they stop drinking. Their nervous system is going to go all haywire. Blood pressure sky high, heart is going to be racing, they're going to be sweating, the brain is going to be in a significant traumatic state where you have to get that person to the hospital. Princess Margaret Hospital, Doctors Hospital, the Rand Memorial Hospital, or the clinics right away so that life-saving measures can happen. The next part of it would be in the case where, they're sober, but they recognize that, hey, I have people, places, things, emotions, that's going to cause me to drink. I need help. I need to get this under control. Then that is where a rehab center comes into play, a long-term program. Now, at the Community Counseling Assessment Center, we have the outpatient program, which is really for the highly motivated. And I find that for someone with an alcohol or substance use disorder, that usually does not work. They need to be admitted to an inpatient facility, which in this case would be the St. Louis Rehabilitation Center's detox program. Because in that hospital setting, that's where they're going to get the care in terms of their physical bodies, the medical doctors. They're also going to get the psychiatric and psychological treatment. There's also the occupational therapy, rehabilitation therapy, spiritual emphasis, all of that they're going to get within the minimum for detox is 2 weeks. But again, that's usually like putting a Band-Aid on a wound. Some people need 4, 6 weeks. Some people need the long stay program, which we would have had in effect prior to COVID-19, which unfortunately has been dismantled, but I'm hearing that they're trying to revive that. And that long stay program can be up to 4 or 5 months. And so it depends on where that person is at. And the holistic treatment, the biopsychosocial spiritual approach, treat all of those aspects. Because someone, again, biologically, if there's a genetic predisposition, we need to know that. That person needs to understand that. Pharmacotherapy may need to be given to that person as well for that biological component. The psycho component is what traumas you've been dealing with, what led you on this path, why you are thinking negatively. So they get the psychological treatment. Socially, in the case of socioeconomics, if they don't have a house, they don't know how they're going to take care of their kids, they don't have a job, all of that is going to cause them to relax. And so that's why social service worker is also part of this holistic approach. And then last but not least, spirituality, faith in God. Even the atheist has a faith. And so we recognize that, hey, God has created me fearfully and wonderfully made. Life has to be better than this, than me getting drunk and all of the problems that ensues with it.
Yes, it has to be. Yes, thank you so much, Dr. Morgan.
Yes, well, in the situations where I would have to deal with young patients with STIs, right? So I do quite a bit of referrals to Dr. Nose because we find that, especially in new diagnoses, especially in HIV diagnoses with young people, there is really a psychosocial component to that. So we try to get all our new diagnosed patients a mental health analysis, a mental health assessment, and I usually refer them to Dr. Nose, and so we work hand in hand with that. But when we talk about STIs, we tend to treat. We treat a lot of this treatment, especially if it's HIV, which is an STI. We get them the counseling they need, but they are counseled with in regards to all the other STIs, right? In terms of prevention. So prevention is a big thing we do, both me in government and at Emmanuel Medical Center. Prevention. It could be condomizing. It could be PrEP or PEP, post-exposure prophylaxis for HIV, or post-exposure prophylaxis for HIV, syphilis, or one of the other STIs. So counseling is very important. So prevention is a very big part of what I do when I work with STI patients. Counseling, right? And partner counseling too. Partner counseling too is very important because STI could turn into a very messy situation because one partner could have an STI and the other doesn't. Or one partner could have an STI and can't find a way to tell the other partner. I've had scenarios where one partner have an STI and I have to treat both the sweetheart and the spouse.
Oh, mercy.
Yeah. So yeah, I tend to be in a lot of sticky situations, and it has to be done. It has to be done very tactfully, very confidentially, privately, with skill, because I always tell people that people may not envision how STIs or an STI diagnosis could go wrong, but STI diagnoses can lead to it can lead to domestic violence. It can lead to murder if it's not handled in the proper way, because it speaks to betrayal. It speaks to infidelity. It speaks to a lack of trust. Yes. And so all of these things, and that is why I tend to work with a team, a confidential private team, and people who are trained in STI medicine, because we now have the skill on how to actually deal with these circumstances, because STIs, by virtue of the name, doesn't only affect the person infected, it affects the partner or partners. And so everyone in this circle now has to be treated. And sometimes that could be very difficult. I remember a case I had to do. I had to treat 5 people connected to this one person.
Oh boy.
And the person didn't even remember, and the person only remembered the last name of 2 of them. He had to call the other 3 to get the last name of the 3, because I had to write a script for them. And 2 or 3 out of these 5 people had spouses, or they were in other sexual relationships.
Wow.
So it's an extenuating circumstance. So STIs could become very complicated. It could become this complicated web of persons involved, right? And then, people are connected to other people, right? Sometimes people don't want to call other people name, right? And that's a problem too. So a lot of people who are connected to this one case may not be treated, because the person who is sitting in the front of me cannot call the person name, because you'll be outing the person, right? So, and we do live in a small society, right?
Dr. Morgan?
Yes?
I'm sorry, I just got a breakthrough. What happened is we have a certain time on the radio. We could continue if you want the conversation afterwards. So you've been listening to the program Transforming Lives on Global 99.5, Cable TV 974. You're on Facebook, we're on YouTube. We will continue the conversation as long as the doctors are aware. So you can now go to the YouTube, Transforming Lives Radio Show, Facebook, and join us, or WhatsApp me at 433-6917. I'll send you the link. Thank you for listening on Global 99.5, Cable TV 974, Transforming Live on behalf of myself, Dave Williams, my co-host, Jackie Gardner, Shandira Smith, Dr. Morgan, Dr. Sean Knowles, encouraging you to have a wonderful Sunday afternoon. Thank you, Dr. Morgan. You can continue. We'll be off the radio now.
Okay. Yes. So STIs could be very complicated. I've had scenarios also where couples were about to fight. They were about to fight. And then with the finger pointing, someone is saying, man, I get this from you. No, you get this from me. And I've had scenarios where one person is negative and the other person positive. And so that opens a whole kettle of confusion there. So it could be, it could be very, very complicated. I guess that's the word I keep using. It'd be complicated.
I can only imagine.
Yeah.
I would not love to have your jobs. Let me stick to my food. Yes, but it's been really a really interesting conversation. Wow, it's been really good. I just want to thank you so much for the information that you would have shared with us this evening. So I don't know if anybody in the audience has any questions. And while you think about the question, I want to ask about communion and alcohol.
And there's a question in the chat too. Okay, Shandira, there's a question in the chat. Yeah, by Mike Moss.
Oh, okay. Because that's about communion. I want to hear the communion and alcohol. Like for a person who, let's say for a person, for example, who is recovering from alcohol, do you advise that they take regular communion with I know some churches actually have alcohol and some have grape juice.
So let me say this. Once you get the psychiatric, psychological treatment as a part of your management for your alcohol use disorder, because again, there's no cure for addiction. You're going to learn what your triggers are. Okay, so if I can say, I have some patients who we would have worked with at the Sundance Rehabilitation Center, did the Long Straight program. They know what their triggers are. They are so careful about alcohol that they will not even eat rum cake, or they will not even take any cough medication that will have alcohol. They're so cognizant of that because they recognize, you know what, if I get even a little taste of it, it's going to trigger me to cause me to go seek the beer or the wine. And so it depends on the individual. And I can't see a pastor or priest being not able to make amends to someone who wants to take the communion and provide them with grape juice as opposed to wine. So in that way, obviously it means that you as the individual, you have to take responsibility and make sure you know what your triggers are and put boundaries in place so that you do not cross those boundaries that's going to cause you to end up having a relapse, okay? And so that psychiatric, psychological part of your management is so important because it's going to really help you to understand you as the individual and what you need to do to make sure. You know, some people, they know I can't go to Kemp Road or Bar 20 Corner because that's going to be a trigger for me, because that's where I spend many of my days drinking, and that euphoric feeling and seeing familiar faces is going to cause me to relapse. And so to answer that, it depends on the individual. Know your triggers, put boundaries in place where you do not cross them to ensure that your mental, physical, and spiritual health remains intact.
Amen. I like that. Yes. Okay. So the other question in the chat is, how do you enforce alcohol age limit? I see many cases of underage children sent to a nearby bar or liquor store to buy alcohol for older persons.
I don't mean to sound facetious. Do we even have an age limit in this country? Because it is puzzling to me. And I mean, you know, Lord, let me not say it. People are perishing for a lack of knowledge. Maybe some people just don't know. You're sending a child to a bar to bring you buy you a bottle of gin. You know, I want to say you need to be spanked as the adult, and the person at the bar needs to be spanked for allowing that child. And so we need to put laws in place to make sure that that doesn't happen. If there are laws, they're not being enforced, all right? Because no child should be able to enter into a liquor store and purchase a bottle of alcohol or beer or whatever, or a vape. I've had some kids go into these Chinese establishments buying vapes. That should not be happening. You know the child is a child underage, okay? And so we got to go back to legislation. We need to go back to our judiciary and put measures in place. Again, I want to see 24. In the US, it's 21. I guess if we take 21, you'll get the majority of our young people. No young person under the age of 24 should have access. No adult over that age should be giving them alcohol. And we put measures in place where it's a heavy fine the bar, fine the restaurant, put a heavy fine on the liquor store if it's been found that you sold alcohol to a minor or you gave alcohol to someone under the age. And so it requires a culture shift. We want to save this nation, and it's going to require years. I guarantee you, if we put these practices in place, we implement them, and we deal with it from a law standpoint, in 10 years, we'll see the improvement in this nation. In terms of the education system, in terms of the amount of people dealing with addictions, in terms of people who are having other vices that ensues as a result from starting that first drink, exposure of that first drink when they're an adolescent. But are we prepared as a nation to do it? That's the question.
That's $1 million question. Yes, laws indeed need to be enforced. Okay. I see a hand raised. Bolts 10. Go ahead with your question. Unacto Bolts 10. I'm sure I'm pronouncing that properly.
Okay, yeah, I was trying to unmute. Good afternoon, everyone. Very valuable information. And it's me, Nurse Gibbs. What we're seeing in our society today is that, you know, alcohol is so accepted. And like just about every household, even the Christian household, you go in, people who men of the cloth and stuff like that, they just get their cupboards full of liquor and stuff. And so it's really like acceptable. But my concern really is for our law enforcement officers, defense force and police force, as to whether there is a code of conduct. Because we see them like they're killing up themselves in motor vehicle accidents because they're drunk and driving. And then, you know, we just had a situation the other day where an off-duty policeman who was at a bar establishment killed somebody else. That cost the nation because all the people pack up and going back to the US. And so, you know, it impedes their judgment, impairs their judgment. Because, you know, when they drinking, some on the job, a lot of people on the job drinking. And so I think there ought to be a code of conduct for our officers in terms of even their conduct and being drunk and stuff like that, even while they are off duty, because it's really affecting the nation. And so I think, like, I don't know if it could be recommended, but I think it's something that the government needs to consider.
And ma'am, I agree with you 1000%. Being in law enforcement, I'm a reservist for the Royal Bahamas Defense Force. It bothers me that our law enforcement agencies, they have canteens on their premises where alcohol is made available, which means if I'm going to work, I'm supposed to be working. How is it that I can go and drink beer or wine or whatever while I'm on duty? Plus, I'm holding a weapon. That makes no sense to me. Now, the argument that was given to me when I approached it is that is how in the case of the Defense Force, we follow the British Navy, and that is how they do things. Well, at the end of the day, you got to use simple common sense, simple wisdom. If I'm working, I should not have any exposure to alcohol, whether it's a cup, whether it's a beer, whether it's 2 beers. Because at the end of the day, we know that alcohol is a drug. It is capable of causing you to have impaired judgment with the use of that weapon. And at the end of the day, it is something that I am concerned about, and I agree with you. But again, that's going to have to go to the drawing table with the Ministry of National Security, our government, to change that and to put that in place, because it is concerning. And on the flip side of that, the police see a lot of trauma, see a lot of dead bodies, a lot of blood, a lot of serious cases, serious issues. That itself can cause them to deal with that inappropriately through drug use and alcohol use. And so psychological interventions need to be in place, our law enforcement agencies, so that they can properly process and deal with the amount of trauma and issues that they're seeing. So there are loopholes, and I'm personally, as a physician, as a reservist, I'm concerned about it. But again, we have to make these drastic changes if we want to see better and see.
Yes, that is so true. And I just want to thank all of you for participating in our show today. I have to run off to another, I have to do a presentation on another show. So if you have any more questions, you can go right ahead and ask your questions. But thank you all so much for attending and participating today. And doctors, thank you so much, Doctors Knowles and Morgan. Thank you so, so much.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Okay, I join Shandira, and also thanking both of you for being a part of the show. As usual, Dr. Knowles, you have always supported us on the program. I want to thank you for that personally. And for Dr. Morgan, my first time, I connected with him at the domestic, the seminar that was put on by the Domestic Violence Unit at the Police College. So I twice he was a participant. But as usual, the show is always open. It's always an opportunity. Just WhatsApp me, message me, and you can be a part of the program if you want to bring on a guest or talk about anything. Especially Dr. Knowles have been on our show a number of times. Dr. Morgan, this is our first time connecting with you, and that's a very important topic because as Dr. Knowles knows, I do a lot of work with men and boys. Any other question? The doctors have to go. We had only asked them for an hour. Any comments? Doctors, if you have to go, we appreciate you, but anybody else want to unmute and just maybe share in the conversation? We'll remain open for another 5-10 minutes, and you can just open the mic. Other than that, have a wonderful evening.